Hey, I'm Emma. At 240, we help teachers pass their certification exams, and today, we're going to help you. This video is going to prepare you for Subtest 1 of the MTEL General Curriculum Exam. MTEL stands for Massachusetts Test for Educator Licensure, and it's test code 178. Now, the MTEL General Curriculum Exam is split into two subtests. Subtest 1 covers language arts as well as history and social science. Subtest 2 includes mathematics, science, technology, and engineering. Each subtest contains approximately 60 multiple choice questions and one open response item, which we'll refer to as a CRQ, but more on that later. In this video, we're only going to focus on Subtest 1, and we're going to cover three things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts you'll see on the test, and we're going to look at a few practice questions. Let's get into it. The MTEL General Curriculum Subtest 1 is made up of three sub-areas: language arts, history and social science, and integration of knowledge and understanding. Language arts and history and social science are the multiple choice sub-areas. Language arts is worth 30% of the overall score, while history and social science is worth double that at 60%. Each of these sub-areas has objectives listed under it to specify the content covered in each. Integration of knowledge and understanding is the open response item, also known as a constructed response question, which we call CRQ for short. The CRQ is worth 10% of the exam's overall score. Now, that is great information to have, if I do say so myself. But I bet you want to know more before you feel ready to walk into your testing room. Am I right? Well, today is your lucky day because not only am I super fun to spend YouTube time with, but I can also teach you some of the most essential need-to-knows for this exam. I helped make a study guide for it and everything. So let's dive in. We'll start in the language arts sub-area and focus our attention on Objective 1, which is all about literature. You'll need to know the basics of teaching students about literature, like the characteristics of different genres, as well as how to apply your own knowledge of literary analysis to answer questions based on passages. Expect to see questions about theme, plot development, and figurative language. And that's just to name a few key concepts. Now, we have it all covered in the study guide, but right now, let's take a deep dive into figurative language. Figurative language refers to words and phrases that enhance a piece of writing, often by going beyond their literal meanings. Authors often use figurative language to convey meaning or get their point across in a meaningful way. Authors have many figurative language tools up their sleeves, but two of the most important to know, and the two that are easy to mix up, are similes and metaphors. A simile is a comparison of two things, using the words like or as, while a metaphor is a comparison of an object or action to something else which is not literally applicable. So, this video is like a lifesaver, is an example of a simile, while this video is a lifesaver, is an example of a metaphor. Here's another example. Emma is like a superhero, is a simile, but Emma is a superhero, is a metaphor. Onward and upward to Competency 2. This one is all about informational text. Just like with the first competency, you'll need to know the basics of informational text, like common types and structures, and you'll need to apply this knowledge as well. Something important to know here is how an author organizes their writing and why. When we analyze organization, we're identifying how the author constructs the passage or how paragraphs relate to one another. Sometimes you'll need to focus on the order in which the material in the passage is presented, while other times the focus is on logic and reasoning. Let's dig even deeper into ways authors structure their writing by logic and reasoning. When authors organize their writing by cause and effect, they describe an event and follow the description with possible outcomes. To decide if this structure is being used, ask yourself, did the author explain what would happen after something else occurred? Problem and solution is a type of organization in which the author poses a problem and then provides answers or ideas about how to solve it. Claim and refutation is a type of organization in which the author argues against a statement, fact, or claim. To identify this one, look for the author to provide a statement, use however or in fact, and then provide counter-arguments. Compare and contrast is a type of organization in which the author provides similarities and differences about two ideas. For example, pros and cons. We have all of this and more covered in our study guide. There are really only pros to subscribing, no cons. All right, let's keep rolling. Competency 3 covers writing and research. Expect to apply knowledge of techniques for composing different types of writing, such as argumentative, informative, and narrative, as well as techniques for conducting research. Oh, and all of that writing should be clear, coherent, and apply standard rules of English conventions, including grammar, usage, capitalization, punctuation, and spelling. Oh, and it should strategically utilize technology too. Got all that? Just kidding, I know it's a lot. But like I mentioned before, you can find everything you need to pass your exam in our 240 study guide. It's aligned to your exam and contains plenty of practice questions, instructional content, and even a full-length practice test. Now let's take a peek inside the study guide and let one of our all-star tutors tell us about the writing process.
Like a lot of other things, writing can be a complex process. Writers go through stages before holding a final, polished product in their hands. The stages are pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing.
Are you intrigued? Me too. You can watch the whole thing in the study guide, but we'll take a quick jump back in and hear more about two of the stages, revising and editing.
Revising entails reviewing the draft and making adjustments to improve the content of the writing. This is the time to make sure the writing clearly addresses the purpose and audience. Improvements to the organization and word choice are made. Details are analyzed to determine if there are any that should be added, deleted, changed, or moved to support the overall clarity of the writing piece. Editing also entails reviewing the draft, but this time focusing on improving the conventions of the writing. This is the time to zero in on proper grammar, spelling, punctuation, and capitalization, and make corrections as needed. In simple terms, revising improves content, and editing corrects conventions.
Just one more competency left in the language arts sub-area. Let's get to it. Competency 4 is all about speaking and listening. You'll demonstrate knowledge of language, as well as techniques for presenting information and participating in discussions. Are you listening? Because it is essential that you know about active listening. Active listening is a crucial aspect of oral communication. When individuals practice active listening, they express engagement with what is being said. This skill is needed to participate in a wide range of collaborative communication, like conversations, group discussions, and formal presentations. We did it! We made it through Sub-Area 1. Now let's turn our attention from language arts to history and social science. The first competency in the social studies domain covers economics and geography. Whoa, those are definitely two huge pieces of the social studies pie. So while we can't cover everything you need to know about these ginormous topics, we'll pick the skills and concepts that are essential to know for your exam. And remember, if you want even more, subscribe to the 240 study guide. We cover the essential concepts of government and economics, plus everything else you need to know to pass your test with confidence. But right now, let's get into the economics content that you're likely to see on your exam. You'll need to be familiar with the basic concepts of economics. So things like scarcity, needs and wants, goods and services, personal finance like income and budgeting, voluntary exchange, consumer decision-making, and how humans and societies use resources. When you list them all out like that, it does seem like a lot. But don't worry, the study guide has just the right content you'll need to understand each one without getting bogged down in the details. Now let's take a look at some of the key concepts in geography. You should study Massachusetts and US geography, including state boundaries and significant physical features, regions of the US, map skills, basic geographic terms and map tools like cardinal directions, scales, and legends, and types of maps and basic map projections. Now let's talk about the reason economics and geography are lumped together on this exam. Human geography includes the relationship between economics and physical geography by focusing on how natural resources and climate impact things like industries, development of certain areas over others, settlement patterns, and trade. For example, the economies of New England colonies relied heavily on shipbuilding, logging, and hunting due to geographic factors, while southern colonies with longer growing seasons and large expanses of fertile soil hinged on agricultural production. One important tip for these types of questions is to remember the importance of water in determining where humans settled and developed civilizations. Nearly all civilizations formed around bodies of water because water supports farming, trade, and travel. Along the same lines, some of the culture-focused questions in this competency will ask about concepts related to human migration and immigration patterns, including cultural exchange, the effects of conquest and colonization, the movement of enslaved people, and the human impact of various groups and innovations on the environment. You know what? I have just the thing to show you to highlight the connection between the historical movement of humans and groups and geographic factors. Let's take a peek inside your 240 study guide.
As the last country to begin exploring and colonizing the New World, England had slim pickings when it came to establishing colonies. The other powers were not interested in the eastern seaboard because it was far from South and Central America, the center of exploration. But while they lacked strong pull factors, England had much stronger push factors for would-be colonists. English people moved to the colonies in search of a new life.
Don't you just love studying with videos? Me too. We have plenty more on all sorts of topics in the study guide. Let's see what the next competency is all about. Competency 6 covers world history to 1700 CE. You'll need to know about significant civilizations, eras, events, and people throughout history for these questions. No biggie, right? Just all of human history. But there is a trick to these questions. They tend to focus on cause and effect, or change and continuity over time. So they probably won't ask you about specific dates, but they may ask you to pick which event was caused by the invention of the printing press, for example. In terms of civilizations or regions, you may see questions about early human migration and the agricultural revolution, civilizations of the Fertile Crescent, including Mesopotamian, technological, and social advancements, ancient Africa and the Middle East, ancient India, East Asia, and Oceania, the Roman, Greek, and Islamic empires, and native tribes and civilizations of the Americas. Let's do a quick dive into a popular ancient history topic. A lot of questions are likely to focus on the birthplace of civilization, the Fertile Crescent. Many of the most notable ancient civilizations developed in the Fertile Crescent, the area extending from the Persian Gulf to the southeastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and continuing from the southern coast of the Mediterranean around the northern Nile River. The region encompasses the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates rivers, which provided water and generated fertile soil. Because the region was so fertile, it was conducive to agriculture and had a lot of natural wildlife. Therefore, societies were able to shift from hunter-gatherer to sedentary agricultural communities. The Fertile Crescent is considered the cradle of civilization because it was the birthplace of agriculture, urbanization, writing, trade, science, history, and organized religion, just to name a few. The Fertile Crescent includes the Mesopotamia region and ancient Egypt. Civilizations in the Fertile Crescent, like the Sumerians and Egyptians, contributed to world culture and were responsible for the development of Western civilization. Now, we have plenty more where that came from in our study guide, but right now, let's dive into the next competency. You're doing great. We're making so much progress. Competency 7 is all about U.S. and state history. These questions will focus on the key events of U.S. history and their effects on Massachusetts history. Key events and concepts, like these. And because of Massachusetts' key role in colonial history, there may be a focus on that period on your exam. For example, you're more likely to see a question or two about the Boston Massacre and related figures than about the Battle of Gettysburg, because Massachusetts. Great, so you got all that? No, but really, don't worry. We've got great info on all of these topics in the study guide. Remember, we're here to talk about what will actually be on the exam. There will be time for studying once you have this baseline information. With that in mind, an important note about this exam is that multiple standards in this section specifically include the often underrepresented history of marginalized groups. For example, several standards focus on the history of the civil rights movements for African Americans, Native Americans, women, the disabled community, and the LGBTQ community. These questions will likely focus on key figures and events in these movements, relationships between these movements like common figures, borrowed tactics, and critiques of one to the other, and causes and effects of key legislation, including U.S. constitutional amendments and Jim Crow laws. So that is quite a bit to study, but remember, the guide has everything you need to ace these questions. Okay, moving on to the next competency. Competency 8 focuses on the structure and functions, principles, and development of the U.S. government. In this competency, you can expect to see questions about the purpose of government within a society, U.S. civic values, concepts, and rights, preserving the common good, the basics of representative democracy and due process, basic U.S. government stuff. You'll also need to know about the structure and functions of government on the federal, state, and local levels. Be sure to remember key documents from the history of the US and worldwide. Let's narrow in on one of the concepts that may not be as familiar to you, the Articles of Confederation. We've heard of them, right? Take a look at this nifty graphic we made to help you figure out the key differences between the Articles of Confederation and the US Constitution. The Articles of Confederation were written during the American Revolution, and they were basically like a wartime constitution. The document was meant to outline the structure and functions of the new government to allow the country to run during the revolution. When the war was over, the articles weren't robust enough to give the federal government all the power it needed to run a real peacetime country. So the framers got together at the Constitutional Convention of 1787 to create a new document. They wrote and ratified the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution includes the first 10 amendments, known as the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights then opened the door for lots more amendments down the road. Anyway, you can definitely expect to see exam questions that ask you to compare the functions or historical contexts of different government documents. So keep that one in mind at test time. And if you liked that graphic, there's way more where that came from in our guide. You can find the link for that below, but before you do, we just have one more competency, an overview of the constructed response section, and some practice questions you won't want to miss. So let's do it. The very last competency is a doozy. It covers research methods for different social science disciplines, skills you'll need to be a successful social studies teacher, and instructional strategies you should know. For social science research methods, you may see questions about how archaeologists, sociologists, historians, geographers, and other types of PhDs do the research that generates our social studies content, and how those methods differ. For example, an economist studying ancient trade is going to use different resources and methods than a geographer studying the same topic. You may see questions about how those fields interact and use research from other disciplines to answer complex questions as well. You'll also be tested on your own skills. These are likely to require you to analyze text for main idea, purpose, bias, evidence, and other details, know the difference between and uses for primary and secondary sources and how to evaluate them, identify methods for evaluating sources, know how to read and represent data in graphics like tables, timelines, and graphs, evaluate and analyze the purpose and/or bias of visual media like political cartoons and other art, tell the difference between fact and opinion, critique arguments to determine the merit of claims based on evidence, and understand how historical context impacts text analysis, especially for primary sources. The last part of this competency is instruction. Now, aspects of the instructional approach and other pedagogical concepts will be woven into questions throughout the exam. But one interesting facet is understanding methods for facilitating discussions about potentially fraught topics that are inherent in the study of history and society. Things like racism, sexism, and prejudice in the past and present. And identifying instructional strategies that seek to dismantle these narratives. That would be things like using methods that promote critical thinking, teaching students to recognize and push back against stereotypes, and even just including a lot of perspectives and stories in your curriculum. Pretty important stuff. Okay, take a deep breath. You made it through ELA and social studies. I bet you started this video with a few questions in your mind about what the essay portion of this test is all about. Well, your wondering days are over. We've made it to the last sub-area, integration of knowledge and understanding. This is where you'll answer that one constructed response question, or CRQ. You will be given primary or secondary sources centered around a specific history or social science topic. Your job is to write an analysis of approximately 150 to 300 words of how that topic is portrayed in those sources. So you'll see those sources. These could be excerpts from a text or even some kind of image or map. Then the directions will look something like this. You'll be asked to compare the main ideas or information each source presents about the topic, analyze the purpose and point of view of the sources, and use evidence or examples from the sources to support your comparison. So ask yourself this: what are each of these sources saying about the topic? How do they relate to each other? And what evidence did I use from the sources to figure that out? And don't worry, the topic of the CRQ will fall under the same areas that are covered on the multiple choice portion of the exam. So you know this. You just need to be able to explain it clearly. Okay, the best way to feel more confident is to practice answering a CRQ. I'm going to show you one of the practice prompts from the 240 study guide. I recommend taking a minute to plan how you would answer before reading the model response I give you. Here's the prompt. We need to analyze and compare how these two sources treat the role or purpose of government. There's not only one correct way to write this, but here's a strong one to review. This response shows a strong understanding of the topic by correctly pointing out that these two documents share similar ideologies and that one was a direct influence on the other. It summarizes specific aspects of the texts to explain that Jefferson used and built upon Locke's philosophies of government to justify declaring independence from Britain. See? You can totally handle this. And the 240 Study Guide has more practice prompts like that one, so you can be sure you're ready. Now that we've seen a sample constructed response question, it's time to look at the multiple choice questions. Let's start back at the beginning with Subarea 1, Language Arts. Let's take a look at a writing sample and decide the best way to improve it. The mallard is our most common duck, found in all flyways. The males are often called greenheads. The mallard's main wintering area is the lower Mississippi Basin and along the Gulf Coast, but many stay as far north as open waters permit. Flocks often feed in early morning and late afternoon in nearby harvested fields, returning to marshes and creeks to spend the night. Which sentence should be removed from this paragraph to maintain clarity and purpose? Sentence 1, 2, 3, or 4. The feedback feature in the 240 Study Guide tells us that since sentence 2 is the only one that does not focus on the bird's habitat, it should be removed. And that's an effective way to improve that writing sample. All right, now let's see a couple of questions from our history and social science subarea. Ooh, remember earlier when we talked about the importance of water? Keep that in mind for this next question. River systems provided all of the following to ancient civilizations except... So because of the wording of the question, we know that we're looking for the choice that makes a false statement. Let's take a look at the options in the form of a statement to help us better choose which one is false. River systems provided land that was easily farmed. That is true. River systems provided convenient transportation networks. Also true. River systems provided easily defended homesteads. We haven't really talked about that one. And the last one, river systems provided abundant sources of food. That one is definitely true. So C is the right choice here. River-based settlements have a lot of benefits, but they can be harder to defend, with ports being vulnerable to enemy ships. Okay, great work. For the next one, let's check out one with a document attached. In this case, it's a graph. For which of the following reasons would a teacher use a population pyramid, like the one above? So the first thing we want to do is look at the title and labels. We know that this population pyramid is showing the US population in the year 2000. We can also see that this graph will provide information about age, population in millions, and gender. Now let's look at the answer choices and see if we can rule anything out. This graph doesn't say anything about geographic area, aside from the fact that it's US population data, so that's out. It also doesn't provide income information, so that rules out socioeconomic demographics. We also don't have any information about cause of death, so C is also a no-go. We do have information on population distribution based on age in the US, which makes D the correct answer here. To demonstrate any of the other topics, we would need another set of data or another source of evidence. And that's it! You made it! Congratulations on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. But there's still so much more to learn. If you really want to make sure you're prepared for the MTEL General Curriculum Subtest 1, take the next step and subscribe to the 240 Study Guide. It has hours of videos so you can watch or listen while doing chores. And it's test-aligned so you know precisely what you need to study. It has hundreds of practice questions so you can be sure you're ready. And it has the money-back guarantee. So click the link below right now.